Thanks for staying with us. Now, warning that our next segment includes discussions of sexual violence and viewer discretion may be advised.
Yeah, this is something I just couldn't get my head around. Former Garda Shane Flanagan, who impersonated a female colleague online and incited strangers to come to her house to rape her, will be sentenced next month for these crimes.
Yeah, joining us now to discuss Mr. Flanagan's actions and behaviour with his online spaces is Cyprus psychologist Dr. Liam Challoner. Good morning to you.
Morning.
Hi, Liam.
Can you give us a background to this case then?
Yeah, it's not a straightforward case. So between 2018 and 2020, former Garda Flanagan impersonated a female colleague where he was pretending to be her in a fetish website, but also in a Facebook account as well. He had images of her posting about her Strava, so her running route, images of her daughters, photographs of her Google Maps outside of her home, her air code, lots of sensitive information. And what he was intending to do, which he described as pure fantasy, was to incite CNC, which is consensual, non-consensual sexual intercourse, which is simulated or role-play rape. As part of this, one of the men who was contacted actually reached out to the victim on Facebook, and she eventually decided to create a profile herself on that same fetish website, interacted with the guy who was pretending to be her, and he started to send her that same information, and she eventually went to the guards in December of 2020.
Because she herself is a guard.
She herself is a guard.
And when this happened to her, she was like, well, something's up, and she started investigating herself.
Which is sometimes happens with like impersonation and catfishing and trolling cases. Yeah. And she obviously was trying to differentiate between whether it was just someone using a couple of my images as opposed to lots of sensitive personal information.
And the thing is about this case is that he was using these images because they were actually friends on Facebook and stuff like that. So he had access to these images where maybe some people who weren't in that
They were friends in real life.
They were friends in real life, but like, so that's how he had this access.
Yeah.
But did anything ever materialise where people did even try to go and knock at her door to try and go in and do these acts?
No, so she only was ever contacted through Facebook. What was important is the perpetrator, let's say, he said he had no sexual relationship with her, no romantic relationship with her, and it was purely friendship. He was inside her online network and obviously a friend in real life. So he had additional information that you wouldn't normally necessarily have in like an impersonation or a catfish case.
And he knew her daughters, and her daughters were involved in this.
Yeah, so he had photographs of her daughters that he would share. He was encouraging them to incite rape, but also incite violence. So there's some of the charges. So encouraging them to break into her home or abduct her while she was out running.
Can you just get this straight? He was encouraging men on these sites to go to the house that he'd given the error code for, break in and rape them as a sort of fantasy thing, and that she, even though she might be saying no, it is sort of consensual because this is all part of this fantasy.
But as far as the men who were contacted were aware, this had already been consented to ahead of time,
that she
and
would be
prearranged.
prepared to do this.
Yeah, and she was completely unaware, obviously.
And let's just remember, there are consenting adults involved in this.
Yeah.
These are fetishes that people have, and it's being organised, you know, online or in real life through people. They're not doing anything illegal.
Yeah.
But now we're living in a world where, because everything is done anonymously and because things are organised online, we can have a situation like this, like Giselle Pellicot in France, where things were organised by her husband online, where she was then drugged and raped numerous times over many, many years.
Yeah, and with Giselle Pellicot's case, she wasn't impersonated. There's slight differences between the two cases.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily compare the two because of the nuances between them. I would be very cautious around it. You have to remember, this guard has experienced a significant trauma. So she's been impersonated, she's had people threaten to come to her home, and she's incredibly resilient in her role. She's had fear for her children, and she's spoken about the anxiety, the psychosomatic symptoms she has. So she's having panic attacks. Imagine if this was someone who was less resilient as well, and didn't have the resilience to go and investigate this case herself.
For people who are watching in this morning, could this happen to anyone who's online? Like, is it the more you share, the more is out there? So the more you're putting online on Instagram and Facebook, the more that's out there for people to be able to capture.
It's a normal part of us engaging in social networks. It's hyper-personal communication. We want to connect to the other people in our online spaces the same way we connect offline. We need to be very cautious around the types of content we post. So like our running route, for example, making sure that's private. In this particular case, that's not going to help because she was connected to her perpetrator.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Like there's very little she could do. If we were to take a selfie now, we have geolocation in it. What we should be trying to do is, before we upload that to any online space, is remove as much of that information as possible.
If you were taking those photographs in your home,
I would remove things
that.
like geolocation, anything that identifies it, something like we know that influencers here in Ireland have posted up in cafes and posted on their social media and then been assaulted in real life because they've had
at those locations, because people knew they were going.
The times.
It's a regular place they go to.
We have to be really cautious about the information we post, but also we still have to live in an online space and know that these things have consequences offline. We should, and to be honest, if I was connected to someone on social media, I expect that they're not going to go and share my private or personal information with someone else, regardless of its content.
Well, we know that that's just not true.
Yeah.
Like if we're looking at everything that's happening with Tattle Life, we just know that that's not true.
Yeah.
Are laws keeping pace with the sort of thing that's happening online?
So the answer is no. The only exception of that is the Non-Consensual Sharing of Images Act. Like a lot of you sign up to these websites, and traditionally, and we saw it with Ashley Madison, which was a website about having affairs.
Yeah.
They put passport information into that website. It was breached, and it's such a sensitive piece of information. People don't want to provide that information online. Now, in terms of legislation around impersonation, it's only if someone commits a fraud against you where it actually is going to come into effect. The legislation needs to catch up a lot quicker.
So if they commit fraud against you,
then
they
it's
can be
a crime.
charged. But surely if they do anything else against you...
Well, in this particular case, it's inciting rape and inciting violence. He was also found to have child sexual abuse material, which is a separate crime in itself and hasn't really come into play as much in this case. There's a plethora of stuff to be dealt with.
So for people watching at home, how can... we talk about this all the time. How can we protect ourselves online?
I would be very mindful of the privacy layers I have on social media. So even if you have a private account, the private storage, but there's very limited things that you can do if someone is already within that network.
And because these were friends.
Because they were friends. If it's someone who you do not know and are not connected to, and you have sufficient privacy levels, they wouldn't be able to see your Strava posting, for example, or the images that you post, or click into your icon.
So what's a Strava post?
So Strava is a running app. Where it posts a map of your start to finish.
So you'd know,
and it's people share that as a sense of accomplishment, not so someone
look where
else
I
can
ran today, look
like
at my
abuse
10K route type of thing, or my 5K, and this is what I do every week.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if there's enough of that information, obviously it can be mapped and tracked.
I think for everyone, this case is just utterly shocking because, of course, it's involving two guards who are meant to protect us. That was his job. He's meant to be there to protect us.
Yeah.
And he incited violence and rape against a colleague who's also there to protect us. So that's really bad. I know that in your podcast, who you do with Nicola Fox Hamilton, you are going to be taking a look at this and this sort of thing. Do you think more stuff like this is going to happen?
I think this is quite a rare case. Like there's elements of like psychopathy in this where someone has like moral disengagement, a lack of norms and social norms. I would hope that we see less cases like this. The common impersonation we see is someone pretending to be someone else on something like Snapchat or a more minor form of impersonation.
The podcast is called In Bits. It's with Nicola Fox Hamilton and Dr. Liam Challoner. Thank you so much for coming in and talk to us. And just all we can do is think about that family and what they've been through and the amazing fortitude that woman showed. We'll be back with you on Ireland Day very shortly.